Hello. Thank you for joining me for the monthly Teaching Assistant webinar. In this session, we will talk about some Headnotes and Digest, Key Number Digest tips, secondary sources, and finally, advanced foldering techniques. Now, with respect to Headnotes, I know that you all know what Headnotes are, but I want to sort of peel back the layer, if you will, and since you are a teaching assistant and your roles may vary from school to school, professor to professor, some of you will have to teach Headnotes and the West Digest system. Some of you may even need to show it in print, while others, you may not have that responsibility. Still, it's good for you to know the ins and outs and the background and the foundation upon which this system is built. First and foremost, when you are looking at cases on Westlaw, as you already know, there are two editorial enhancements that are going to make your understanding and your 1L's understanding of that case much easier. The first is a synopsis, which you know is just a summary of the facts, issue, and the holding in the case. And the second are headnotes. And quite simply, headnotes summarize each and every issue in the case itself. Mealy v. Mobile, for example. This particular case has 11 headnotes, 11 distinct issues. The first issue deals with the main topic, appeal and error. The subtopic is review using standard applied to below. Here's a summary of that particular issue. The second issue deals with marriage and cohabitation, as does the third, fourth, and fifth issues. Scrolling down further, we get into some really interesting damages issues. Damages are the issues contained in Headnotes 8 through 11. And really, this is the reason why people cite and use the Mealy case, because this is the case that talks about the elements or the standard for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Now, keep in mind that Headnotes serve multiple purposes. As I said, each headnote that you see is simply a summary of an individual issue in that case. The headnotes that you see are written by expert attorney editors, most of whom who've had 15 to 20 years of experience reading cases and paraphrasing those issues. And this is an important point to drive home to your 1Ls. These editors do not simply copy and paste from the case. They're going to read and digest, if you will, paraphrase that issue in such a way so that someone who's coming into this case for the first time can quickly glance and understand exactly what that particular case is. The editors will take the names of parties and characterize their relationships. They will take the names of automobiles. You know, there are many different cases out there where the judge specifically throughout the opinion talked about the make and model rather than generic car or automobile. You're not going to want to search on Subaru Forester or, or Nissan Sentra. If you're running a search looking for cases dealing with defectively designed automobiles, you're going to want to search using car or automobile. That's where the headnote editors save us a lot of angst. They give us confidence so that we can quickly read these headnotes and understand exactly what the issues were. I wanted to sort of jump to this handout, and this is a little bit dated at this point. It's 8 years old, but it should really drive home this point of how much added value the headnote editors provide us by summarizing those issues. Take, for example, the letter I. As of, and this was May 1st of 2012, this number is certainly greater now. As of May 1st of 2012, there were over 14,000 cases with a point of law about insurance where the judge not once discussed the term insurance in the opinion. Let's take one that I ran last year. Last year, I was looking for cases involving a landlord-tenant issue where the judge not once mentioned landlord-tenant. Now, when I ran that search, I could only get up to 10,000 cases. There are at least 10,000 cases in the American case law system where the judge not once mentioned landlord-tenant, yet there were issues that dealt with landlord-tenant rights. What did the judge mention instead? Plaintiff, defendant, appellant, appellee, Smith and Jones. So hopefully you see and you can get the 1Ls to understand why headnotes are so important on Westlaw. Nobody else does this. Okay, so that's the second thing that a headnote will do for us. The third thing, every single headnote from every single case resides somewhere in the West topic and key number system. As you already know, the topic and key number system is simply a gigantic index of all American case law. Currently, we have over 450 main legal topics. Damages, for example, is one of those main topics. And by the way, on the alphabetical list of topics, damages happens to be topic number 115. That's all that number means. So this particular issue, where they talk about, I'm sorry, this wasn't an IIED issue. This is an issue dealing with negligent infliction of emotional distress and whether a bystander can recover. This particular issue has been classified to the main topic damages, subtopic Roman numeral 3 grounds and subjects of compensatory damages. Subtopic under that is 3A. The subtopic under that, obviously, 3A2, mental suffering and emotional distress, injury or threat to another, bystanders, until we get to that final number, 57.27 in general. Now, in a second, I'm going to click and get every case in California classified to that particular issue. But before I go there, one other thing I want you to be aware of surrounding the West key number system. It's a taxonomy, and I think of it as a living, breathing organism that adapts, changes, and grows. If we had this conversation 40 years ago, there was no bystander recovery for negligent infliction of emotional distress. So 40 years ago, if we had looked at the West topic and key number system, it might have stopped at 3A2. But as the law has expanded, so hasn't the key number system. So now we can recover. There is bystander recovery for negligent infliction of emotional distress. Now, as I said, if this is the issue I'm researching, and I want every single case classified to that minute point of law, one click, I get every case in California on this particular subject. And the really cool thing about this, and we're pulling California state and federal cases, but the really cool thing about this, these are listed in reverse chronological order. We give you the ability to get the seminal case on a specific issue. Simply sort by most cited, and now the seminal case in California will be listed first. Dillon v. Legg is the seminal case. It's been cited 523 times for that particular issue. That is what you should lead with in a memo or brief. One final thing I wanted to, or two final things before we move on from this. You know, you're going to be teaching 1Ls who may not have ever really used an index in print. So how do you get that concept of index searching? Because pretty much that's what we're doing here. Well, anyone who's done a hashtag search on Twitter has done or is familiar with index searching. So that's kind of how I would drive that particular point home. Final thing I wanted to discuss in this segment, one other really nice thing about the West topic and key number system is that it's homogeneous. That topic and key number is going to be the same in every single jurisdiction. So even if I started with a case from outside my jurisdiction, if I'm in Massachusetts, I don't really care about California cases that talk about bystander recovery for NIED. I can simply click change here, and since that key number system is homogeneous, I can move from California to Massachusetts with one click. I've now gotten all of the bystander recovery cases in Massachusetts on that particular point. All right, let's move on. Click Westlaw Edge. I'm going to go back to the home page. And I wanted to talk a little bit about secondary sources, just review these with you, because one of the things you're going to want to mention to your 1Ls is that, look, if you're not given a known document to start with, a case, statute, regulation on point, if you're simply starting with keyword searching, you always want to start with secondary sources for 3 reasons. Number 1, secondary sources are going to give you background on an issue that you are unfamiliar with. Number 2, secondary sources are going to point you to which of the 3 branches of government controls your cause of action. Is this social host liability issue governed by cases, statutes, regulations, or a combination of those 3? Well, I read a secondary source and I will discern which of those 3 branches of government controls my matter. Third reason you always go to a secondary source first. As you know, every secondary source is going to contain hypertext links to the primary sources that control that matter. You get a good secondary source, 80% of your research is done. Now, the problem with secondary sources is that there are a lot of them out there. I ran this search in Massachusetts. I got 137. Keep in mind that secondary sources exist on a spectrum. You have academic-based secondary sources out there, like this law review article from Suffolk, and you have practice-based secondary sources out there, the CLE from MCLE, or this practice series chapter from Mass Practice. And there are a lot of hybrids in between. I think of ALR, American Law Reports, as a hybrid secondary source. It's one that is used by practitioners as well as academic researchers. One of the tips that I would start 1Ls with when going off on their own for the first time, particularly if they are assigned a specific state for their open memo, when you run a search and go to secondary sources, I would always take a look at ALRs. As I said, I think those are going to be really good for both academic as well as practicing lawyers. But once you move on from ALRs, the tip here would be to go to the jurisdiction filter, select your state's secondary sources, and click apply. By doing so, you're going to readily identify, obviously, those secondary sources from your jurisdiction. But most states publish a practice series. That's really where practitioners in that state would start when researching an issue that is unfamiliar to them. So in Massachusetts, our practice series, as I said a few minutes ago, is Mass Practice. It's about 50 volumes. It covers every aspect of practicing in this state. Those of you from California, you've got Witkin, you've got Cal Jurisprudence. I think there's another one. Texas has a practice series called, I believe, Texas Practice. New York has Seagulls and New York Practice. I mean, most states publish a practice series, and that's really where you're going to want to start researching when unfamiliar with an issue. And as I said earlier, we go to a practice series like this, I get background on an issue that's unfamiliar to me, number 1. Number 2, I can tell which of the 3 branches of government governs this matter. And number 3, every secondary source is going to contain footnotes and or endnotes that will allow you to hyperlink to the primary sources that control. So it's just something you want to point out to your 1Ls. Right, the final thing that I'd like to discuss today, some advanced foldering tips. Hopefully you have all used and enjoyed some of the benefits of folders on Westlaw. If I click the link at the top, that static folders link, it gives me an ability to look at the 5 most recent folders I've been working in. But if I click view all, I am taken to this full screen where it's listing all of my folders. I can sort by title or date added. And on the left-hand side, there's a mini window which gives you an ability to accomplish some additional administrative tasks with respect to folders. So if you wanted to export these folders, etc., you could do so. And that's actually something you would want to do before you graduate. Any folders you want to take with you for future purposes before your passwords get disconnected, you'd want to export those folders to your laptop, to your desktop. What I wanted to do in the final few minutes was give you a couple of tips that you may not be aware of with respect to folders. First tip, when you're looking at a folder, that first icon is a research report. If your 1Ls have to complete a Pathfinder, the research report is something you'd want to show them, because what that will do with one click is provide a summary of each document that they have foldered for that particular project. And if they have added highlights and notes, i.e. work product, to any of these documents, those notes and highlights would be part of the research report. And by the way, if they did have to complete a Pathfinder, I think you can use research report in combination with history. Remember, history on Westlaw is saved for an entire year, and it is searchable, and you can filter your history. So if they had to sort of provide their thinking, what were the searches they ran to get these documents, you could use a combination of history and that research report to build their Pathfinder. The other thing that I think is important for you to understand as teaching assistants is that 1Ls can share their folders with you. So if you want to share, that's that third icon, just click that icon, type the name or names of the people with whom you want to share. Once you've added all those people, click continue, and then define their level of access. A reviewer can simply read what you add to a folder. A contributor could add and remove items to a folder. So be wary of giving someone contributor status, because they would be able to delete items in the folder. But once you click share, it will tell you that that item, or that folder, I should say, is being shared. And you'll notice that that folder now has a little person inside. When you're looking at your folders, at your folder tree, if you will, any folders that have that little person inside are folders that are being shared with other users. Now, how can someone tell whether or not a Westlaw user is sharing a folder with them? Again, in this small window, just scroll towards the bottom, you'll see folders that are being shared with you. Final tip, and this is really where Westlaw gives you confidence in terms of whether or not you have completed your research. When you folder items on Westlaw, we are going to break down and sort of see if there are common patterns, issues that are common to the cases, statutes, and regulations and secondary sources that you've foldered. And what we're going to do is list those issues out on the right-hand side. So of the items I foldered in this FERPA folder, it found 2 distinct issues. The first issue is the validity and construction of the Federal or Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. And it's recommending 22 documents that are not in our folder. When I click issue 1, of those 22 documents, 10 are cases, 2 are statutes, 10 are secondary sources. So you're probably going to want to take a look at the folder analysis we provide you, because it really does give you that safety net, that sense that you've gotten everything on a specific issue. Now, the final thing, I just want to thank you for joining me today. Final thing, remember, you have access, lawschool.thomsonreuters.com/TA, to the Teaching Assistant Program, where we have a lot of really good content, instructional aids, exercises. We have upcoming webinars, as well as a certification we've designed for TAs. Thank you very much, and happy researching.